Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here with us today. My name is Rebecca O'Neill. I am the managing director here at Gage. I'll just briefly self-describe. I have long brown hair, green eyes. I'm wearing a white shirt, and I identify as white, and I go by she, her. We are thrilled to be gathering here today on National Disability Independence Day with just some tremendous partners and lots of new friends on the line to dig into just a hugely important topic. Before we get started, I want to bring your attention to two accessibility services available to you. Closed captions, which will run along the bottom of your screen, along with an ASL interpreter also on screen. For those who are new to us today, Gage is an insights platform that centers the voices of communities. So we believe that when brands and companies begin with the perspectives at the heart of diverse communities, everybody wins. And we are excited to get to work with partners like Sephora, Pinterest, and so many others, really just committed to listening and learning from communities in new ways. Today is really an opportunity to do just that, sort of as a community. So specifically, we are focusing on how brands can understand and better meet the needs of people with disabilities, right? This is a group as broad and diverse as our country as a whole. Today's conversation comes thanks to our collaboration with Diversability, which is a disabled-run, disabled-led social enterprise dedicated to elevating disability pride, building disability power, and advancing disability leadership. Diversability has been just a critical partner for us here at Gage, specifically under the leadership of its founder and CEO, Tiffany Yu, just really helping us deepen our own understanding and support our clients and partners as they are striving to do the same. So we are excited about this conversation. It comes as we officially mark the release of our report on brand allyship with disability communities, co-presented by our team here at Gage and our partners at Diversability. You can download the report on gage.ai. That's gage.ai if you want to sort of explore as today's session is going down. There is a Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Please feel free to use this tool to ask any questions you have throughout the session. We've got a Q&A portion scheduled for towards the end of our time together. So keep them coming and we'll get to as much as we can. So let's get into it. I am going to let our panelists introduce themselves for fear I may sort of wax too long and too poetic about their amazing bios. But today we are joined by three just incredible voices, all members of our Gage panel here, which we are just so grateful for. Dr. Chantrice Holloman, an author and educator. Katarina Rivera, who's a DEI consultant and content creator at Blindish Latina, and Emerson Wheeler, who is a health equity coordinator for disability inclusion. So welcome to all three of you. Dr. Holloman, I would love to pass it over to you. Maybe you can kick us off with some introductions.
Sure, I would love to. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Dr. Chantrice Sims Holloman. I am a brown-skinned African-American woman with wearing red circle frame glasses and red lipstick, along with a royal blue cardigan over a white shirt and a pair of gold hoop earrings and a gold pendant around my neck that is in the shape of an elephant. My hair is kind of blondish white. I'm an author and an educator who currently works as a contracted employee. I'm an instructional design contractor for the CDC, but I am also a fairly recently physically disabled woman. And so I use my social media platform to help educate my followers about the challenges associated with living with a disability. And I am super excited to be here.
Thank you, Dr. Holloman. Katarina, let's go over to you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Katarina, or Catarina. I'm a light-skinned Latina woman with dark brown wavy hair. I have glasses with a dark brown frame. I am wearing a maroon shirt with a collar and buttons that is short sleeve, and I have on little silver hoops. And behind me is, I think, a brown, it looks brown, but I think it's a white wall. I don't know the appearance of it. So I am a public speaker, DEI consultant, and content creator. I focus specifically on disability awareness, inclusion, and accessibility in all of my work. I am a TEDx speaker, and I've spoken with many companies about how to make their workplace more inclusive for everyone. I speak about disability because I myself am disabled. I am deafblind. I have a condition called Usher syndrome, which means that I have a hearing disability and a vision disability. I wear hearing aids and I have a very reduced visual field, just about this little box. I'm looking forward to today's session.
Thank you. Emerson, let's pass it over to you.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Emerson. I use they, them, or he, him pronouns. I'm a white person with light brownish short hair, glasses, and headphones on, and I've got some windows behind me and a navy blue button-down shirt with little red and white dots on it. I currently work in public health and health equity for disability. I'm a former medical student and had to switch careers due to my disabilities. And turns out I'm way more passionate about this than medicine. So it worked out super well. And yeah, I have trained hundreds of employees, state employees on anti-ableism and disability justice practices as it relates to their health, public health work. I've been a part of Diversability for a number of years and just really glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for being here and just for bringing your perspectives to this conversation. We are in the presence of greatness today. So we are going to go ahead and dig into it. We have got a lot we want to get through. And again, folks, do feel free to chat in questions as they pop up. But we're going to start with some basics. So first up, we know that words and language matter a lot, and that for anyone to even approach sort of meaningful engagement, potentially being an ally with members of the disability community, it's important to really begin with a clear understanding of preferred language and why it matters, sort of some of the choices you might make in language. Katarina, I would love to start with you. Can you share a bit about sort of language you prefer for describing people who identify as having disabilities? What should folks outside the community potentially keep in mind? Help us sort of get grounded in this topic.
Thank you. This is a very important topic, and I frequently experience a lot of debate around language. And the first thing I want to say is that language is not the only thing that we need to focus on, but language communicates beliefs and attitudes. So it is part of the larger picture, and conversations about language are necessary. When it comes to disability, many people think that disability itself is negative. So they believe the word disability is a bad word, and it's not a bad word. The disability advocates have emphatically said disability is not a bad word. If you want to see examples of this dialogue, the hashtag say the word will give you more of what the community is actually saying about this topic. So I want everyone to feel comfortable using the word disability. We have two different respectful ways of identifying disabled people. There's person first language, person with a disability. In that example, the word person comes first. Then we have identity first language, disabled person. And that's an example where the identity comes before the word person. I use identity first language. That's what resonates for me. And I think that it is more common for people who are older, who have been engaged in advocacy historically. They have seen so much more dehumanization of disabled people than people of my generation have. And when we look at the national disability organizations, many of them were founded in the 70s and around this time of strong advocacy. So you're going to see a lot of person first language from those institutions. And so I think there's not anything wrong with either of them. It's really a preference. And you need to ask people. If you're going to talk with one individual, you have an opportunity to ask them, what do you prefer and how do you identify? The other thing is that not everyone in the disability community agrees. We're not a monolith. People have different feelings about their own disabilities. So while I advise people not to use euphemisms like handicapable, differently abled, some people might identify as with these terms themselves, and I'm going to respect that.
That's really, really helpful. Emerson, anything you would layer on there? Again, counter perspectives, agree, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I love what you said, Katarina. My personal preference is identity first language as well. So it means referring to me as a disabled person or a neurodivergent person. I think it was 1974 that the push for person first language started. And you're right, the logic behind that being, maybe they'll see us as a person if we put the person in front. I see my disability as inextricably part of who I am and how I interact with the world. And therefore, identity first language feels more appropriate and accurate for me. Just as an example, neurodivergence makes my interests really deep and passionate. How do I disconnect that from me as a person and who I am? I can't really do that. So it just really is, it's as simple as that. And I love my golden rule for this is just respect individual preference always. There are certain communities that I know of that have sort of unanimously said that they prefer one or the other, like the deaf community and the autistic community seem to prefer identity first language. The community that I'm aware of that prefers person first language is folks with intellectual disabilities. But as with everything, if you meet somebody from a community, it's as simple as like, what are your pronouns? What kind of respectful language could I use for you? What do you prefer? Yeah, simple as that. And wheelchair user, not wheelchair bound too.
Helpful, really helpful. Great. Dr. Holloman, anything you would add here?
Well, Katarina and Emerson did such a great job of answering the question the way that I would answer this question. But I will also add that as a Black woman, I do identity first also. And the way that I think about it is that I wouldn't say that I'm a woman with Blackness. So I would say that I am a Black woman. So I prefer to say that I am a Black disabled woman. I also am a bilateral lower limb amputee, and I am a wheelchair user. I am not wheelchair bound. And so those things just, the way I like to think about it is, what are the things about me that I can't hide that are the most obvious? And that has to do with my gender and my race, and in this case, my physical disability. And so it just seems odd to me, not that I'm any less of a person, of course, but these are just, it's part of who I am. And I'm proud of all the aspects of me. So identity first works with me.
Yeah, this is really helpful. And yeah, just this emphasis on folks getting comfortable asking the question, being ready to sort of personalize and pivot. And I would say, as we are sort of walking through this conversation, either if there are places where you think the language even I'm using or that are coming from some of our questions that don't feel quite right, would love to use that as sort of a learning opportunity for all of us. Or even in just some of the responses you're providing, if there are sort of intentional moves you're making, illuminating that I think can be helpful. I know a lot of this, it's about sort of getting comfortable and rolling up sleeves. And so we want to make sure we do some of that here. So thank you for this perspective. Just to go a little bit deeper here. So or perhaps it's a bit of a zoom out. So we're here to talk about kind of brands specifically and their potential to deliver on this promise of inclusion really broadly, and specifically allyship for the disability community, which has not always been sort of deeply integrated into inclusion and equity efforts at the corporate level. So want to start with sort of the state of play. What are you all sort of seeing today? Are there any specific brands that are doing things well? Are there sort of things you're encouraged about on the landscape as a whole? Would love to understand sort of just your perspective on what you're seeing in this moment, where we are seeing a little bit more of sort of certainly activity from brands, a little bit more conversation kind of in the public square around this. And so maybe Emerson, why don't we start with you on this one? Would love to hear kind of what you're seeing on sort of the brand and allyship front.
Yeah. This is like such a good question. I really love what Barbie and Lego have been doing specifically. I think that they have both been doing a really good job of sort of normalizing disability as just sort of a thing and, you know, not a big deal and just another, you know, I got a Lego kit the other day that just had a random person with a prosthetic limb in it. And it just was another person in the kit. Just a nice surprise, you know?
Yeah.
I think that that authentic representation, but also not making it sort of a huge thing or an inspiration, or, you know, it's just it's a normal sickness and illness and disability, and it's all part of being a human being and part of life. And I think that both of those, and also like Monster High, I think has done a pretty good job in terms of just keeping it normal, but including us. Yeah, I don't know if that's
No, I think
it's not a super detailed response.
no,
but
I think it's really helpful, and we definitely do want to kind of weave into this conversation as well, and we can, you know, Dr. Hellman and Katarina, as you weigh in here, we can weave some of this in as well. Some big questions around kind of what we're seeing in campaigns, marketing, advertising, certainly as a layer of various inclusion efforts. But Dr. Hellman, let's go to you. Sort of state of play. What are you seeing? Are there things to be excited about? Major challenges? What are you seeing when it comes to sort of brands and allyship with the disability community?
I was actually really excited when I saw this question because I was watching television the other day, and Domino's apparently has this new feature where you can like put in your exact location, and the Domino's people are like flying around, they're dropping off pizza to people at all kinds of places. I just happened to look at the commercial and realize that the Domino's person was dropping off a pizza to a man and a woman, and the woman was in a wheelchair, and she was at a race, and she was getting her pizza, and then she like flew off to do something else. And I remember immediately thinking, huh, well, how cool is that? Also, to Emerson's point, Lego, I have a friend of mine who actually loves Legos and has a vision impairment. And she told me that she has Legos that have Braille on them, which I didn't even know was a thing. I happen to have 3 Barbies that have disabilities. I have Barbie in a wheelchair, I have Barbie with a prosthetic leg, and I also have a Barbie with vitiligo. So Mattel Legos are doing an amazing job. I also want to give a shout out to Target, who over the past couple of years has just done a phenomenal job of not broadcasting, hey, we're putting a disabled child or a disabled man or woman in our ad campaign. They're just there. So they're included. It's not anything special. It's not anything over the top. And I love that. I love that it's not, no one's making a big deal. Like no one's trying to say, hey, look at us. We're, incorporating disabled people. It's just people who happen to have a disability, which I just, it's good when you are able to see yourself represented. And again, as a Black woman, I'm very, very conscious and keen when I see things in media that I don't normally see, that seem to be becoming more and more of an everyday thing. So those are the ones that I'm super excited about.
Yeah, it's interesting that some of the companies that have been named so far are so focused on young people and kids. Sort of interesting that's where we're seeing some of the leadership. Katarina, how about you? Any additional perspectives on this?
Yes, I love to focus on design and the products that are designed for us, but hopefully with us. So I have paid a lot of attention to Tommy Hilfiger Adaptive. line. I don't know much about like the ethics. I haven't fully vetted them, but what I have liked about it is how much they've amplified that this exists and the marketing they've done. I've seen them do TV spots where they have disabled models on morning shows showing off the clothes. So I think it's great to see a big brand putting in marketing dollars to showcase and market their adaptive clothing. They see the value in doing that and what it offers. I also paid a lot of attention to Nike when they launched the Fly E sneaker. They say that they designed this shoe with insights from the disabled community. I saw influencers in my online space wearing the sneaker and talking about it and how easy it was to put it on. And I think that was really, really exciting. Another thing that I am hoping to see a big change in is air travel, because for far too long, or just decades, airlines are breaking and damaging wheelchairs all the time.
Wow.
We've just seen an article come out from Delta partnering with an initiative, like collaboration of many, many, many people who are trying to address every excuse that airlines have put out as to why people can't stay in their wheelchairs on an airplane.
Wow.
And they tested and showcased a seat where you keep the same seat and all you do is fold it up and someone can come in and a wheelchair user can stay in their chair on the plane. Right now it is an exposition. So I'm really hoping that we see this come into the marketplace for everyone, and that they also solve the other problems, for example, of being able to use the bathroom. Beyond this, like focus on big brands, I also think that the disabled community has done such a great job of creating disability-owned brands, our own brands that are really meeting our needs and that are very cool. So we have, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but it's I don't know if it's liberare. That's how I want to say it in Spanish. Like liberare. It's inclusive underwear, bras, lingerie designed by disabled women. We have Neo Walk sticks, which are very, very cool. Unhidden clothing. So we have all these brands that I hope will continue to grow because we also can create for us. And that's what we always need as well. Like people not making assumptions about what we like, want, or need, and making things look fashionable.
I want to just hop in here and add another brand that I personally like, and I don't know if I'm going to pronounce this correctly, but I think it's Izzy or Izzy Adaptive, and I believe they're based out of Canada, and they actually have this. It's a fairly small line because creating adaptive clothing actually is fairly expensive, but I've purchased a couple of pieces from them. And they are owned disability owned company, and they take a lot of pride and spend a lot of time making sure that just like finding a pair of jeans that will fit if you're in a wheelchair, you have no idea how difficult it is to find a pair of jeans that or if you have a mobility issue. I'm also partially paralyzed, so trying to put on jeans as an amputee in a wheelchair and it's more than a notion. So I appreciate the fact that there's a pair of jeans that I can actually lie down and put on comfortably, and they're not riding down in the back. Just they do a wonderful job. And so to Katarina's point, just having companies that are by us, for us, run by us, creating things that we can wear. It's nice to have a seat at the table, but it's even better when you own the table.
Absolutely. That is tremendously helpful, and we'll definitely share out some of those brands in follow up to this conversation. I think one thing we're hearing, and Emerson, you framed this up nicely, is just this idea of normalization. And Dr. Hellman, you touched on this too, right? It's not a big deal that someone who has a disability is being featured in kind of a campaign or marketing, creative, and so forth. One of the things that we've heard in the course of other research that we've done for some of our partners is kind of a concern around this sort of the constant heroism narrative, right? people with disabilities are always Olympic swimmers or overcoming some sort of just like extreme hardship to do extraordinary things. Dr. Hellman, you pushed us more to, pizza, getting a pizza on a busy weeknight as a better way to feature folks. But just curious, anything else that you would sort of layer on kind of guardrails that folks should think about as they're trying to be really thoughtful about, okay, how do I paint a more inclusive picture in sort of the materials that I'm putting out?
I'm going to hop in here on this one. One of the things to look out for that I think is really important is this idea of what I kind of like to call inspiration porn.
Mm-hmm.
That people who will tell me that I'm inspiring if they see me at the grocery store, or if I'm getting gas, or I'm just doing some regular kind of thing. And so I haven't seen one of these commercials in a while, but there'll be a commercial with a disabled person, and they kind of have this like dramatic music in the background as the person is, going to the park, or, at the mall buying something, and almost as if to either make people feel really, really good about the life that they have, or to feel pity for the, I don't know. But definitely advertisers need to stay away from that kind of message. Going back to what we said previously, it's just life. There's no need to applaud me because I happen to drive a car, so I use hand controls. And, there are people who will see me get out my car and they just stare. And then this one guy like applauded me. And I just kind of gave him this look like, why are you applauding? He said, because you're driving. Do you drive? Yeah. Should I applaud you? And he's like, well, no, because, and I'm just looking like, yeah, I know. So definitely stay away from the that whole, you inspire me thing, especially if you see someone, a disabled person, just living life. We're just living life. That's it. It doesn't, we don't need the accolades. Just kind of let us be.
Yeah. Katerina, I think maybe you have some additional thoughts on this one.
Yes, I definitely think that we need to avoid the two narratives that are so problematic of inspiration or tragedy. And I do want disabled people to be portrayed as full, whole humans that are cool in advertising and are presented in an aspirational way, just like other models are or other people that are featured are. So I'll give an example of a campaign I saw that was really great. It's called Feels Like UGG. So UGG, UGG, the footwear, I think they have clothing now as well. It's a campaign with queer neurodivergent Korean American artist Jez Chung. And it includes an interview with Jez on the UGG website. So I felt it was very respectful, and it allowed Jez to tell her whole story about who she is rather than just being used to kind of sell. So I thought that was really exciting. And the campaign is beautiful, very colorful, very fun. And I think brands also need to remember that there are so many different kinds of disabilities. So let's make sure that you're featuring different kinds of people and all the intersectionalities that can exist. One more thing that I also think about in terms of what brands do in marketing, obviously many brands do work with creators and create brand partnerships. So I love when I see disabled creators that are being approached by big brands. However, sometimes there's an issue where we're not being offered the same amount as non-disabled creators, or being expected to kind of work for free or in exchange for product or exposure. So brands really should be avoiding that and should be treating all creators fairly, that we are doing labor and we have expertise.
Absolutely. Emerson, anything you want to add on this one?
Yeah, as folks were talking, I sort of thought of another good guardrail, I guess. Often I'll see campaigns that feature let's say a wheelchair user, a person with a mobility aid, and it's very clear that that mobility aid is not at all something that they use.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Because, maybe the wheelchair is like way too big for them, or they're, it's like, we see that and we know that you're not using disabled models, or, and that's why it's really critical to have folks with disabilities a part of your team for marketing and stuff like that. Cause we're able to see the things that maybe aren't seen. Yeah.
Absolutely. No, that's really, really helpful. So switching gears a bit, but I think sort of in the same general stream, we're coming to the end of July, Disability Pride Month. I'd love to hear a bit about how you think about Disability Pride Month. Is it sort of something that has meaning and deep relevance to you? And how, if yes or if no, how would you want to see brands kind of engage around this moment? Obviously we've seen highs and lows in how brands engage around Black History Month and API Heritage Month and Pride and Hispanic Heritage Month and so forth. Curious what you think about Disability Pride Month specifically. And Katerina, why don't we go to you on this one for some thoughts on this?
Okay, so if we're talking about Disability Pride Month in general and how people feel about it, then I can tell you that I love Disability Pride Month because it really resonates for me. I'm proud of who I am and all the parts of me, and that is something I feel powerful and defiantly about in a world that tells me I'm less than because of my disability, less worthy, less valuable, less capable. That's something that I totally resist. While disability pride can feel subversive to non-disabled people who don't understand it, again, it's because of people thinking disability is negative. It's something that it should not be subversive in any way. So I also want to offer to people that the concept of disability pride doesn't resonate with every person within this disability community. It's not always easy to feel pride, and it doesn't negate the complexities and the difficulties of living in a world that's not designed for us, that is inaccessible. So being proud of my disability doesn't erase the inaccessibility in our world. So there are real challenges that we face, especially with ableism. So I think it's very important to understand that. And if you're a disabled person and you're like, oh, wow, disability pride is so exciting and I want to feel that way, I just don't yet, just continue on your journey, continue, and you will continue to grow and you'll find your place. Now, in terms of brands, I would love to see them recognizing this month, amplifying it just like they do other months, but also creating and taking concrete actions beyond performative tactics. Can you invest resources for also making sure that the disability community benefits from whatever actions you're taking? Can you work with disabled entrepreneurs? Can you create changes to your workplace? You have disabled employees. And I think it's a really wonderful opportunity for brands to see what can they do? Can they help be a part of creating this greater representation of disabled people within society? There's a lot they can do. They have a platform, they have an audience. So how can you do that in a way that creates an impact?
That's really helpful. Emerson, what would you add or layer on here?
Yeah, that was such a good answer, Katerina. I personally, disability pride has been a journey for me. I'm one of the 80% or so of people who acquire a disability after 18, as well as I was born with one. To me, the pride comes from survival, existing. Like, I'm still here. I'm in pain every day, and I'm still here. I encounter barriers to all sorts of things that other people may or may not have to deal with, and I am still here. And not only am I still here, but there's a whole community of people who are also dealing with these barriers and biases and stuff, and fighting the good fight. And that's part of the pride too, is being proud of each other for still being here, and for standing up for equity. And I think in terms of brands, just echoing what Katarina said about allyship is really a verb. And if you're, I think performative is probably the right word for this, doing the marketing for disabled people, but not doing the internal work of, hey, 1 in 4 people in the United States has a disability. There's probably a lot of disabled employees within our organization. How are we supporting them? That is equally important, and really shows that you're walking the walk instead of just talking the talk.
Absolutely. Dr. Hallman, what would you add here?
I'm on this panel with these 2 amazing people who just are saying everything that I would that I would say, but I'm also with Emerson. I became disabled in 2018, like 3 months after my 45th birthday. So I lived the majority of my life as a non-disabled person, and for the first, I would say, good 2.5 years, pride is not something that I would say that I was embracing. I was still dealing with sort of my new normal. And so I was trying to figure out how to reach back and grab my old life. So this newness of life really wasn't resonating with me. After about year 3, I think that I became comfortable enough in my own skin that I could say, you know what? Here are all the things that I can still do. I'm still amazing. I'm still all of these things. Let's get it. I'm ready. I'm excited. I'm proud. I'm proud of who I am. And then just to piggyback of both Emerson and Katarina, making sure that their brands aren't just talking the talk, but they're walking the walk too. Right. So it's great that you are highlighting disabled people during this month, but what's going on in your boardroom? Who's in your C-suite? Who are you hiring? How are you interviewing? Because one of the things that I discovered very quickly when I was trying to get back into the workforce, I was a teacher by a profession, was how difficult it was for me to get just the job that I had as somebody who was physically disabled. And then stopping and thinking, how many physically disabled people did I see who were principals, who were superintendents, who were in these positions of leadership? And I started looking at C-suites. I started looking at corporate America, and I didn't see anybody, or I didn't see very many. So thank you for supporting Disability Pride Month, but what internal work are you doing in order to make things better for everybody?
Yeah, that's really helpful. And I think it's worth just calling out, right, some of the tension here that as folks are trying to, navigate this, the importance of this narrative around pride and leaning into that, but not going so far, not letting that lead you into the inspiration porn, to use kind of the phrase that was used. So I think just a helpful sort of landscape and, some important nuance and complexity there. Quick reminder to folks who are listening in today, go ahead and chat in any questions. We've got a few good ones coming in. We're going to turn to our Q&A in just a moment. Before we do that, again, just thinking about sort of folks who may be on the line today, who are sort of internal at different brands, companies, thinking about, how do I push my team or my leadership or my company or myself to kind of really dig in here and take more action to make sure that we're part of solutions and driving inclusivity. You've already shared a ton about, who you're working with, who you're getting input from, who you're hiring, guidance on campaigns. I'm curious if there's anything additional you would share about just sort of where folks should start. This could be either in the realm of how do I talk to my internal leadership about driving the importance of this work, or what are kind of the must-haves that a team should be thinking about? So Dr. Holloman, maybe we'll start with you on this. Any sort of advice you would give to folks who might be on the line who have some work to do and might want to be kind of driving some impact?
Okay, this is such a good question. And it's funny that I was actually thinking about this. I'm traveling with my husband, and so we've been staying in hotels lately. And I will connect this back, I promise. But I was looking at like the shower setup and how things are done in a way to convenience people who are using the shower, who don't have disabilities. And I'm thinking, but if you would, uh, you know, do the shower in such a way that it actually is all inclusive, it helps everybody. So I think that the same thing is true for corporations, for businesses. Making places accessible or providing things for people with disabilities doesn't negate or doesn't exclude other people. It actually includes everybody. It benefits everybody. If you think about, to use an example, if you're outside and there's a curb cut right on the sidewalk, not just disabled people use the curb cut. Everybody uses the curb cut. Women who are, people who are pushing strollers, the person who's, lifting or using the dolly to carry the big box. So I think that one of the easiest ways is don't think about it as what can we do to include disabled people, or how can we best serve disabled people? How can we best make this environment good for everybody? Just everybody. Because if you do that, you're going to include everybody. Also, when you're looking for employees to hire them based on their resume and their credentials. I can't tell you how many jobs that I went on. My resume did not change after I became disabled. Mm-hmm. Okay, the resume looked exactly the same, but the number of jobs that I got interviews for, and then I was ghosted after I went in for the interview. Wow. And it's, when I asked, well, what happened? And a good friend of mine was very transparent. She said, well, what do you think happened? I said, I think that I came in and they saw that I was in a wheelchair and I was an amputee, and they decided to go with somebody different. And she said, yeah, that's what happened. Yeah. So, hire the right people, hire people who are qualified. Don't worry about what they look like or what their exceptionalities are. Just focus on the skill set. And I think that will, that's a really good first step.
That's really helpful. Yeah, one of the things that came through really clearly in the report that we'll release today is this point around kind of COVID, and the world sort of demonstrated its ability to make accommodations for a very different sort of ability of people to get in and out of their houses and all that kind of thing. And so just think it's a powerful point. It can be done if there's sort of the will and attention to do it. Emerson, what would you add here? How would you advise folks that are either trying to push work that's already started or get some things going, or kind of make the case?
Yeah, I have 3 points, and a couple of them have already been talked about. So great minds. 1, disability is not what you think it is. So at first, back up and make sure you understand what the definition of disability is. Make sure you're including folks with mental illness. Make sure you're including, diabetes or schizophrenia, or all sorts of things are categorized as disability. It's not just a wheelchair user or an amputee or deafness. It's so variable, and that's beautiful, but make sure that, you have an appropriate definition of what you're thinking about. Centering disability is going to benefit everyone. Just like what was just said, taking that universal design approach is going to help all sorts of people through that curb cut effect, which is awesome. And then my third point, which I'll be a little bit more verbose about, is this is an ongoing process. So I think a lot of people start in an allyship role and say, okay, there's an endpoint. I'm going to get to that endpoint. I'm going to say, woohoo, we did it. And we'll be done. Like, we'll be good. That's not how it works. So even just thinking about language, right? We're always evolving. And that is what is so cool about language. And, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years down the line, I hope somebody calls me out on language that I'm using now, thinking it's inclusive, but really, we've had more discussion about it and it turns out it wasn't. So I think there's a lot of frustration that comes up when people go into this work with that expectation that there is an endpoint, especially with accessibility stuff and, imagining that there is this 100% accessibility that you could reach, when really accessibility is about the personalization for the particular user. And I think that framing it more in that way, that it's about the journey, not the destination, helps a lot of people not get so frustrated and get burnt out trying to do this work and reach something that doesn't really exist.
Yeah, I feel like we've heard a lot on this call about sort of a learner's mindset, right? And I think that also gets into sort of another meaty topic that we may not have time for today around just questions around intersectionality. And as you all have called out, identities of people with disabilities intersect with all of their other identities. And so, how can brands and companies really think about that in a meaningful way? Katarina, let's turn to you on this question. Any sort of advice, anything you would add here? What should people prioritize?
I love what was already said, so I'm cheering for that. What I'll add on for brands who are new to this space and want to get started in a meaningful way, please consider hiring a disabled consultant to help guide you. We have experts in our community who have worked with companies, we've worked with brands, and I think it's really great to tap into expertise. You also have other experts within your company. Listen to your disabled employees. There are employees who are always organizing, asking for change, who believe that change is possible. And if you do listen to them and become a partner to make their ideas happen, you will continue to build trust, deeper trust, and create a better workplace. I personally was a co-founder of the Disability Affinity Group at my last job before I became an entrepreneur. And that was so motivating because the CEO joined, my boss joined, and I was able to lead like foundational conversations about disability. I remember one conversation we had, I brought in a movie preview that was for a movie with Channing Tatum called Dog. And we watched it and then we discussed it. And we really discussed what was ableist about this. There were so many things, but there was a lot of language about mental health conditions and just a very kind of negative talk about that. And this is about the behavior of a dog. And then there was a moment where he actually faked blindness. And that is so damaging to the blind community because we're often accused of faking blindness. So many people don't understand that blindness is a spectrum. So I use my white cane when I'm out traveling and I use my cell phone. And that's totally valid. I'm still blind, but people are so very focused on this idea that disabled people are faking our disabilities, and it's very damaging. So you have disabled employees who are ready to share this passion with you. Beyond that, obviously, when you're starting out, you need to take time to learn. Take time to learn about disability, really focus on ableism and understanding its impact and how it impacts structures and systems that you're participating in. There are many disabled voices and speakers and TED Talks and books and so many things you can learn from. The last thing that I'll say as a caution is that when you're a company and you're going to do new work, sometimes you partner with the wrong organizations because you have not fully vetted them. And that is something to be very, very mindful of. For example, there is an organization called Autism Speaks that does get consulting work. And when you look at the conversations online about them, about their history, and who is running them. This is not a group that anyone should be partnering with if you actually want to support autistic people. So that's very important to always fully vet, and don't just go based off of, oh, this organization looks good.
That is really helpful. And I think, Katerina, your mention of the CEO, I think also just points to this question around leadership buy-in, right? And what is the evidence that you're not sort of just working in a silo and have sort of given permission to run within a very closed room? So I think really interesting there, and important to think too then, okay, what are the other structures that exist that maybe you could sort of link your efforts to? So maybe there's already some robust efforts in other areas of inclusion, and there's ways to kind of benefit from some of that. We are going to turn to a question from the audience, a really great question here. The question is, what should we do when talking about the disability rights movement, specifically teaching it to kids? Is there specific language to use, disability rights movements versus disability justice, or other words? Anyone have perspective on this one? Emerson, anything you would want to add here?
I would love to start. I think this is a really great chance to highlight ongoing learning. So if we think about the disability rights movement, it centered polio survivors who were largely cis, hetero, white men, right? And as time passed, we sort of recentered more marginalized folks, Black and brown disabled folks, trans disabled folks, people who are disabled and also have other marginalizations. That's disability justice. So the disability rights movement sort of was awesome and helped in a lot of ways. And we learned from it, and we said, we're not centering the right people. We need to reassess and make sure that we're prioritizing the right people, because there's wisdom from both perspectives. I think when you're talking with kids, it's such a cool way of saying, hey, we're all learning all the time, and it's never too late to just sort of change your strategy or your perspective and take new information in and change what you're doing to make it more impactful.
That's really helpful. Katerina, anything you would add on kind of talking to kids about this space?
Well, thank you, Emerson, for outlining that. I feel like that was very clear. And I think that just in general, let's just emphasize disability rights is different than disability justice. And they have different principles. If you would like to look up the principles of disability justice, there is an amazing organization, Sins Invalid, and I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. Just look up 10 disability justice principles and you will find it. It is, yes. And I think that it's also important to acknowledge where you are in the framework. So I know that I'm not doing disability justice work when I'm working with corporations, because we're not challenging the structures of our society. However, I am trying to make it better for the employees I know who are there. Only 21% of disabled employees disclose to HR. So there's a lot of people there who need a better work environment. When talking with kids, I think you just do what you can as a parent. And if they're old enough, put them to watch Crip Camp, amazing documentary on Netflix. You can also watch it for free on YouTube. Use storytelling, talk about the leaders of our community. Judy Human, who we lost this year, is an amazing leader, and she has a young adult book version of her memoir that I think is really lovely to read. And there's so many other people that have created children's books, and they're disabled writers and people in our community. So support those advocates when you are looking to teach your children.
I'll just hop in here and say, don't underestimate children. I think sometimes we try to simplify things for kids, and kids are really a lot more intuitive and intelligent than I think we give them credit for. Just because they're young doesn't mean that they don't understand. So I don't think that, we need to do anything differently, except for maybe, if there's just words or language that they may not understand. But kids are pretty smart. So just share the information with them and answer questions when they have them.
Well, it is hard to believe that our hour is almost up. This has just been incredibly illuminating, and I think we have, I hope, a lot more conversation in our future. As we kind of close out, at least this kind of kickoff chapter, would love just any final comments from the panel here, particular with a lens on sort of what should we look for to know if we're seeing progress on this front, right? If we were to gather back here in a year, which I hope we will, what would we hope to have seen? Maybe as you answer that question, we're also getting lots of comments in the chat on how people can connect with you and find you. So if you want to share social profiles or the best way to contact you, that would be great. So Katarina, why don't we start with you?
Thank you, first of all, for hosting this. I am honored to be here. So thank you to Gage and Diversability. In terms of how can we look for impact, and we have real data points that would be great to see change on. Like, for example, disability employment rates. We are not doing well. And it's not just also employment. Like, I want people to be able to advance and have roles that are supporting them and thriving, and I don't want them to be underemployed. So I think there's just so much that we can look to. I also don't want to see major companies launch apps that are not accessible, launch products that are not accessible. I've been agitating about Threads and how it launched without alt text, and then they recently added alt text and then took it off. There's so much still going on where it should not be acceptable in our world for accessibility to be left out. That's what I want to see change for sure. In terms of reaching me, I'm on Instagram at Blindish Latina. I am sharing lots of educational content there about disability as well as travel content, because that is one of my big passions, inclusive and accessible travel. The other platform that I'm always on is LinkedIn, where you can find me with my name, Catarina Rivera. I hope to connect with you there.
Wonderful. Emerson, let's take it over to you.
Yeah, I'll start with how you can reach me. I'm Merson, the person, on Instagram or LinkedIn. You can connect, follow, message me. I'm Emerson Wheeler on LinkedIn. For me, we can look at the data and stuff, but I think the disability community will know when we've reached a point of acceptance. When we see an ad and we're like, oh, that's cool. Like you're talking about the Domino's ad. Like it's refreshing. It should just be regular. It should just be like, oh, that was just another ad eventually. And I'm sure it will take more than a year to get there. But that's the point at which I think that I will say, yeah, we're there is when it's not like, oh, cool, like neat. So
not a point of conversation yet.
Yeah.
Dr. Holloman, how about you?
You can reach me or find me on Instagram at Dr. Chantrice. And my name is spelled Chant Rise. Stick them together. That's how you spell Chantrice. I am also on Facebook at Chantrice Holloman. It's my personal page, but it's public on purpose so that you can follow all of my shenanigans as I go throughout my day. I'm also on LinkedIn at Chantrice Sims Holloman, EDD, and you can follow me there. I think that we will know that we have made progress when we get to the point where disabled people don't have to fill out special information in order to get services. When it's just, I show up to a restaurant and I can eat, or, I get on a plane in my wheelchair and I lock myself in. When things that are now exceptions become the normal, then I think that we will have reached that point. And this has been so much fun, and I look forward to connecting with anybody who wants to connect with me on social media.
Awesome. Well, in a moment, everyone there'll be a thank you message that appears on the screen highlighting both Gauge and Diversability. But I just want to say, you know, thank everyone for this discussion. Again, just hugely illuminating for me personally, and based on the comments, I think for everyone on the line. So thank you, panelists, for being here, and for everyone who made the time to be here today, particularly who have kind of in their minds, how am I going to push change and see what's possible in my own sphere of influence. As I mentioned, this conversation comes sort of alongside a report put forth by Gauge and Diversability on this topic. It is now live, so you can go dig in, start to educate yourself, share with colleagues and partners who weren't able to join today. That is available at gauge.ai/allyship. So that's gauge.ai/allyship. And again, we'll share that in kind of follow up to this conversation. If you're new to our Gauge community or to the Diversability community and you're interested in joining, definitely let us know. On the Gauge side, you'll head over to the App Store, download our app, and go ahead and get started. But in the meantime, thank you again, everyone, for joining us and for your continued work. We're going to get back together. We're going to see how we've done, and lots more to come. So enjoy the rest of your day.